Welcome everybody to Be Well Informed. Today I'm talking about the direct path, going deeper on the subject. Talking about finding the thinker. And I might go more into this whole thing about being a thinker and what is the thinker more in depth with some deeper episodes in the future, because there's a lot to go over and some things I'm figuring out all this by myself, really, for the most part. Like, all this is based on my experience. It could be wrong, but so is there a thinker within yourself? Is there a person directing thoughts? That's the question that you might, have to yourself. You may even think it's not even worth being a question, because it's like, oh, of course I'm the thinker, David. This is obvious. I'm thinking thoughts here, thinking thoughts. But can you silence your thoughts? Can you stop your thoughts for more than 10 seconds? 20 seconds. Try now for 10 seconds. Were you able to stop your thoughts or not? I'm guessing that for most of you, you weren't able to stop your thoughts because there is no thinker. I want to go deeper on this topic in another episode, but to be completely honest with you, no, we are nothing but programming. A lot of what the ego is programming. You can almost think of like the mind as an algorithm, where the algorithm is survival mechanisms. It's a way to help you survive, and like, for instance, like if you are in the wild, your mind, the algorithm of your mind is going to find ways of surviving, hunting rabbits or whatever you may hunt in the wild. But when you're in the city, when there's not as much to worry about with wilderness and threats and all this other type of stuff, you need nothing to not very much threatens your physical survival, but the mental survival necessary goes on in some ways. And there are things that can threaten your physical survival in this less wild areas, but they're it's a little bit more difficult to do, but that doesn't make it less noticeable for the mind in some ways, because it is more difficult to do, and there's a lot more choices going on, which causes other problems, which I might make another video about. But the algorithm is basically predicting what needs to be done based on record. So the algorithm, it could be something like the negativity bias, which basically helps you to deal with and understand threats. Like if you were to see a positive, like, oh, I got some new, I got some money today, but then you see a negative, oh no, I have a bill to pay or whatever. You're going to focus on the negative because it helps you to deal with what is here. Or you could dwell on it as well. I mean, like I said, it's not a perfect system because it's not made to be perfect. It can't be optimal. So the way that it works, I've talked about this on the podcast, but I'm talking about it here because I want to start talking more about these things on YouTube. But basically, the way that it works is that you have a situation where the mind chooses a path. It does so based on past information. Always, it's going to be based on past information, even if it's information that was only gathered like a second ago. It's still past information, even if it comes from some kind of intuition or vision that comes from the future or whatever. If you believe in such a thing, it still is happening in the past, in the present, which is now the past, even if that vision only happened like half a second ago or whatever. And so because of that, the mind has only a certain reservoir of knowledge to draw from. And it draws from this knowledge to make algorithms and make them work and whatnot. Like I said, it'll be dependent on you, the mind itself, and whatnot. But those memories will help it to survive in the world. If it's not survive in like a physical sense from like danger and threat, it'll be from a social or mental status. And like if me, for instance, you don't want to be outcasted from the group that you're in, because then you could be not be lost without shelter or people to help you in times of need and things like this. And so in order to survive, the mind needs groups in most cases, unless you're really, really, really good in nature and you can handle yourself. But other than that, most people nowadays especially need groups to survive. Even in the wild, you need some kind of group to survive for the most part. And so the algorithm is, like I said, it's not perfect because, like I said, it only works based on what is, the quick and dirty solution and not the optimal solution, right? So for instance, like if you, when it comes to evolution, it kind of works in like really quick moments. Like you either do this or you do that. You don't have a whole lot of time to decide. If you did, it would be optimal, and you'd have the optimal solution. But usually, you have the best solution for that situation, or as close as can be with the decisions that you have. In that same way, evolution sort of works. And the mind's algorithm or program helps with that to a certain degree. So there's basically 3 brain structures. First is like concerned with the physical survival, keeping the body at a good enough kind of health, as good as possible, given its area of expertise, so to speak. Then there's the limbic system, which is more concerned with, and the first is the brain stem, which is concerned with things like breathing and, like your pituitary gland and stuff is in there. And they help but with so the body knows about hunger and thirst, and oh, you're thirsty, you need to drink something. That's something the brainstem helps do and keep regulated for survival reasons. So that's like a physical kind of programming in a sense. And then there's the limbic system, which is kind of emotional program. It keeps the show going, so to speak. Because you have the emotions that they help motivate, they help keep you on that straight and narrow path of survival. Clinging to, and so the mind tries to create an illusion of permanence by holding on to as much as possible impermanent things. And the reason for this is survival. It keeps these things close and near because they could, like a candle flame, go out, leaving you with less things than you had and survival wise and whatnot, and less of a group that you had before, and things like this, right? And so the mind, in order to keep the game going, must do what it does. All a very long answer, but the
16 p.m. Recording duration 6 Ferrite Pro.
Point is that the mind is an algorithm. The mind is basically just a program. And really what the mind is an archival machine in a sense, because all it really knows is past. It can't know future, and it can't really know present. It can observe present, but it can't not know present, because the present is, like you may find out things later that were happening in a past present that you didn't know at the time of presidency. At the present time, you don't know everything that happened in the present, but you can know a lot of things that happened in the past. You can't even know a lot of things that happen in the present. And so the mind, when the next present comes, is preparing to deal with impermanent things by noticing them and holding on even tighter. Like I said, for group reasons and for survival reasons.
Here are some results.
Alexa, stop. Fucking thing. Anyways, so the mind is a computer. It's a program that's running in the background. And there's a bunch of programs within the larger program, a bunch of sub-programs. Like the one sub-program could be like if you find yourself overwhelmed, you could distance yourself from other people, using gestures and words and stuff to keep them away from you for whatever reason, because you're too overwhelmed by emotion or whatever it is. And so there's all kinds of programs running in the mind. And so it's not a question of when a program runs, it's what is the program that's running right now. That usually is important in this kind of instance. What is running right now in the background? What is, and basically that means to become aware of what your mind is doing. So, but that's a subject for another episode. So, what is the thinker really? What is there a thinker? When it comes to the program of the mind, you must understand that the mind is not aware. The mind is not awareness. The mind, the ego, the ego, which is not just ego, but it's also super ego, and it which I'll get into in other episodes, or other videos. But the ego is concerned with keeping you surviving in whatever means that is. So basically, whatever it is that you want, the mind will try and get it, keep it, and make it as permanent as it possibly can, even though it can't make it permanent forever, right? And so, what is the thinker really? That's understanding the thinker logically and with mind. And in that way, you can understand certain parts of it, but in a lot of ways you can't understand at all, because that is still going within the mind's framework, right? But the question really is there really a thinker? So there's one really interesting meditation that you can do where basically you pick a favorite color, or really I think it could be any thought at all, honestly. And what you do is with every in-breath, repeat that thought in your head, and other than that, all there is silence. And with every out-breath is silence. And what I want you to try and do with every in-breath, before that, and after that thought, when the thought begins and then ends, I want you to see if you can find a thinker somewhere inside of your mind, if there is such a thinker. So try that right now. And you may notice that the mind will try and point out things that are there and say that these things are the mind, right? Because that's what the mind does. The mind is holding on to things for various reasons, because those things give it an illusion of permanence. And whenever it does, it focuses on an object that isn't in fact an object. I want you to notice that and go back to what you're doing. Noticing the word, the color, name in your head and every in-breath, and trying to find if there's a thinker that is causing this thought to happen within yourself.
Twelve 23 p.m. Ferrite. Recording duration.
And if the mind points to one
Speech on.
specific thing,
Recording. Channel on button. Recording duration. Pro. Speech off.
and says that is me, that is the thinker. If that thing is an object, look to see if that object passes in time. Has it ever disappeared? If so, maybe it is not. Maybe it is not the thinker. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's also happening like thoughts. And so basically you're searching the silence for the thinker, if there is a thinker. So these thoughts that come, whether it be a word or the color, your favorite color as a word, whether that be blue or yellow or green or whatever, is happening within silence itself. All things that are happening within silence. How do I know this is true? Well, think about what it is that holds Earth and the sky and the universe together. Think about what allows these things to be. Like, if it wasn't for like emptiness within your room, would you have a room that you would be in, that you would want to be in? Because you have all kinds of stuff everywhere. And so emptiness is just as much use to you, if not more in some ways, than stuff that you have in your room. But usually emptiness is overlooked. And in the same way, silence is equally as important, because without silence or emptiness, or what you could also call awareness, you could not be aware of anything. And awareness is absolute nothingness. Why is awareness nothingness or silence or whatever you want to call it? Because think of it this way, right? So if awareness was an object, like a thought or a sound or whatever you might think that the awareness is, how could it become aware of anything? Because when you focus on something, like say if you're trying to remember a bunch of numbers, and somebody came up to you and started saying a bunch of numbers to you while you were trying to memorize a bunch of other numbers, like 4, 9, 7, 6, and they just keep repeating them. Would you be able to remember the numbers as well? And the answer is probably not, because you're going to be distracted and you're going to be like, maybe you're even going to get mad at the person and say, stop saying all these numbers. It's distracting me and I need to focus on what I'm doing here and things like this. And so, at the very least, focus requires a lot of silence to work. At the very least, it requires the ability to block out sounds and noises that distract you from what you are becoming aware of, whatever that is. And so in this way, the thinker itself, well, there is no thinker. Thoughts are arising within emptiness or silence, and returning back to emptiness or silence. Try this again in the future to see if this is true. This isn't something that you should just like listen to and believe and say, oh, this is correct because David says it's right. And no, I want you to experiment. I want you to see this for yourself, so that you can understand what awareness is, and perhaps even go beyond your thoughts. And I'll be making episodes on how to do this more and in future videos. But awareness is emptiness, and this emptiness is what allows everything to be what it is. Without this emptiness, either nothing could be, or nothing could be or would be discernible. Like for instance, if you had a room like we shared before, without any space in it, empty, without any emptiness, everything would be all jumbled. There'd be no room. There'd be worse than no room. There'd be no air. There'd be nothing at all, and it'd be worse than being in a room with no things. Because at least with a room with no things, you can sit there and you can actually do things there if only in your own head and things like this. And so the mind, or the awareness, not the mind, awareness is emptiness, while the mind is what takes up the emptiness of your head and your body. Your body is your mind, because there is physical and then there is mental programming that is happening inside of you. Whatever that programming is, maybe it's fear because you saw an object or whatever. Maybe it's worry. Maybe it's a desire for sex or something like this. And so all of these different things, whatever they are programming from your mind and your body. And so unlike most teachers, spiritual teachers, I will probably be telling you from now on that you probably can't avoid this programming. This programming is going to exist whether you like it or not, whether you want it to be there or not. The only question isn't, are you a program, or are you being enslaved by the program or whatever? It isn't that. It's actually more something like what is the program's influence on you right now? Because there's probably some influence from the program within yourself in some way, whether that be strong or weak. And is it bad to be influenced by the program? It depends on you. I think it's more about degrees than whether it's bad or good. There's a certain degree of influence that may be necessary for life in certain ways, but then there's a certain degree where it can get too strong and things like attachments happen, and then things like sadness and struggle and suffering happens because the program is trying to create permanence where there is none, and it's trying too hard and it's holding on too much. But then it could be too weak. The program could be too weak perhaps, and you wouldn't avoid certain caution because your programming wasn't, you're not listening to his program, or it's, you have become so non-influenced by it that caution goes by, and you don't realize that caution was that useful caution, and so it actually happened, and then maybe you died, or maybe something happened and made your life a little bit more difficult and whatnot. So it's about, I think, finding a middle ground somewhere, whatever that middle ground is. It is. So this actually went a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. So anyways, this is Be Well Informed, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.